Yvette Fielding, the face of Most Haunted, has just broken her silence, and what she revealed is sending chills through both fans and former colleagues. After years of silence, she's come forward with a shocking confession about what really happened behind the cameras of Britain's most infamous paranormal show. What she admitted wasn't just eerie, it was deeply disturbing. Tonight, we uncover the truth Yvette has carried for years. The truth that may finally explain why she walked away from the spotlight and what has haunted her ever since. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear changes everything you thought you knew about Most Haunted. It started quietly, a short interview clip uploaded late at night, tucked between celebrity news and old reruns. Yvette Fielding, the once bright face of Most Haunted, sat in a dim studio, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her microphone. The interviewer began gently, asking about her years hosting Britain's most terrifying paranormal show. But Yvette didn't smile. Her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something too heavy for too long. And then, without warning, she said the words that froze the room. "There are things we filmed that should have never seen the light of day, things that should have stayed buried." The clip spread like wildfire across social media. Within an hour, fans and former crew members were reposting it with captions like, "She's finally saying it," and "This explains everything." People had always wondered if Most Haunted had crossed a line, if something truly dark had followed them beyond the show. Yvette's tone confirmed it. Her voice quivered as she described moments the cameras couldn't show, incidents that left the crew shaken and changed. "We opened doors we didn't understand," she continued, her voice cracking mid-sentence, "and we paid for it." By morning, major outlets like the BBC and The Mirror had picked up the story. Some headlines framed it as a long-overdue confession, others called it a breakdown. But those who'd followed Yvette since the early 2000s knew this wasn't the kind of thing she would fake. She wasn't promoting a reboot, a book, or a tour. This was something else, an unburdening. In the full video, which was later pulled offline, Yvette stared off camera and whispered, "The worst part wasn't what we filmed, it was what came after." A chill went through every viewer who remembered those eerie nights of flickering lights and cold whispers. What came after? What had haunted her for nearly 2 decades? That single question reignited a mystery fans thought they'd buried long ago. Something had happened behind the scenes of Most Haunted, something that left Yvette Fielding scarred, shaken, and afraid to speak. Until now. Long before her haunting confession, Yvette Fielding was one of Britain's most beloved television personalities. She started her career on Blue Peter, smiling in front of millions, radiating warmth and innocence. No one could have imagined that years later she'd become the face of fear, the woman who walked into darkness so the audience didn't have to. In 2002, she and her husband, Carl Beatty, launched a small experimental show on Living TV called Most Haunted. The idea was simple. Take a crew into old buildings rumored to be cursed, lock the doors, and see what happens. No scripts, no special effects, just pure fear. At first, the concept sounded absurd, a ghost-hunting reality show in an age of sitcoms and soaps. But when the first episode aired, the response was explosive. The flickering night vision footage, the gasps, the unfiltered screams. Viewers couldn't look away. Yvette's raw reactions made it real. She wasn't pretending to be brave. She was terrified, yet she still went back, episode after episode, into the dark. That honesty turned her into a household name and made Most Haunted one of the most talked about shows in British television history. But behind the scenes, the energy was different. Crew members spoke of strange interference with their equipment, batteries draining, lights flickering, cold spots appearing out of nowhere. Even skeptics started to feel uneasy. Psychic medium Derek Acora became a breakout star, claiming to channel the dead on live camera. The line between entertainment and genuine contact began to blur. People tuned in not just to be scared, but to witness what they believed might be real. As ratings climbed, the locations grew darker. Abandoned hospitals, plague pits, prisons soaked in centuries of suffering. Yvette started staying awake for days before filming, convinced that sleep made her more vulnerable to spiritual intrusion. Her laughter on camera masked exhaustion, and though the crew played along, some later admitted that they began sensing an oppressive energy that seemed to follow them between episodes. Most Haunted wasn't just a hit show, it became an obsession. Fans sent letters claiming they'd seen spirits in the background, begging Yvette to investigate their homes. She had gone from presenter to paranormal conduit, a role she never asked for but couldn't escape. What no one realized at the time was that Yvette wasn't just hosting a ghost show, she was slowly becoming part of one. For every eerie laugh and jump scare that aired on Most Haunted, there were hours of footage the public was never meant to see. Yvette hinted at this in her recent interview, her eyes darting as she described unexplainable moments that even the editors refused to touch. According to former crew members, some nights were so unsettling that the footage was either destroyed or locked away in storage, labeled simply as "Do Not Use." One camera operator, who worked on the early seasons, recalled that every time they filmed at certain locations, Pluckley Village, Pendle Hill, and the ancient Ram Inn, things went wrong in ways no one could explain. Equipment fried mid-shoot, batteries drained in seconds, shadows moved across walls when no one was there. It wasn't just production stress, he said later. You could feel it, something watching. Yvette's voice trembled as she recounted one of those nights. The crew had been filming in an abandoned hospital when she heard the faint sound of children laughing down a corridor. Thinking it was a prank, she went to investigate. But when she reached the doorway, the laughter stopped. Moments later, a metal bed frame screeched across the floor behind her. The cameras caught her scream, but not what moved it. "That's when I stopped believing this was all harmless fun," she said. "Something wanted us there." After that night, strange coincidences followed. Crew members reported scratches that appeared overnight, nightmares of dark figures, and sudden sickness during editing sessions. A lighting technician quit mid-season, claiming his house lights would flicker every time the show aired. The production company dismissed it as stress, but Yvette knew better. "I could feel it following us home," she whispered. "It didn't stay on location. It never does." Viewers never saw the nights when Yvette refused to speak on camera, frozen by an unseen presence. They never saw the takes where she wept between scenes, begging Carl to stop filming. One producer later admitted, "There were moments when we thought about canceling the show entirely, but the footage, it was too powerful to ignore." Those missing tapes, hours of vanished footage, became legend in paranormal circles. Some say the reels were cursed. Others claim they were hidden to protect reputations. But for Yvette, they represented something worse, proof that the haunting didn't end when the cameras stopped. It lived in the walls, the crew, and most of all, in her. As Most Haunted grew into a phenomenon, the cracks behind the camera began to show. What started as a small, tight-knit team bound by curiosity slowly unraveled under the weight of fear, fame, and something none of them could explain. The tension wasn't just about creative direction or network pressure, it was personal, even spiritual. Crew members began whispering about nightmares, paranoia, and strange coincidences that followed them long after filming wrapped. Some blamed exhaustion, others whispered about something darker. The first major fracture came during the Derek Acorah controversy, when reports surfaced that one of his possessions might have been scripted by a producer as a test. The media turned on the show. Fans accused the team of fakery, and skeptics mocked them publicly. But those inside the production remember it differently. It wasn't about Derek, one former cameraman later said. It was about what happened after that episode. According to him, multiple crew members reported seeing the same figure, a tall, faceless silhouette, standing at the edge of the set during filming. At first, they thought it was a lighting trick. Then one of the boom operators screamed, claiming it moved toward Yvette. The footage was never released. After that night, trust shattered. Derek left the show soon after, taking his version of events to the grave. Other members distanced themselves quietly. Carl and Yvette tried to keep things professional, but even they began to drift apart emotionally. Crew dinners turned into arguments, laughter replaced by silence. Everyone thought the danger was on location, one producer recalled, but the real haunting was between us. Yvette started having recurring dreams, the same one, over and over. She'd be walking through an empty manor house, calling out to her team, but every room was empty. Then she'd hear a whisper, low and familiar, saying, "You brought us here." When she told Carl about it, he brushed it off at first, but soon he began experiencing his own strange phenomena: scratches on his arms, footsteps in their home, disembodied voices on playback. The couple began arguing over whether to continue the show. Yvette wanted to stop. Carl insisted it was too late. Contracts were signed, expectations were high. The network demanded more intensity, more fear, more proof, but the more they chased ghosts, the more the darkness seemed to chase back. Crew members started quitting mid-series, sometimes without explanation. One left a simple note in the control van that read, "Don't go back to that house." By the show's 10th series, Yvette and Carl were barely speaking between takes. The laughter that once held the team together was gone, replaced by something unspoken, a dread that seemed to linger even when the cameras stopped. Yvette later admitted, "We thought we were making a show about the paranormal, but somewhere along the way, we became the story." The rift wasn't just emotional, it felt supernatural, as if whatever they'd been chasing all those years was now feeding off the fear, the guilt, and the growing divide between them. And though Yvette didn't say it aloud at the time, she knew deep down Most Haunted had stopped being a TV show. It had become a curse. Yvette Fielding's voice cracked when she finally described it. The night that, in her words, should have ended Most Haunted forever. It wasn't one of the famous locations or a grand season finale. It was a routine lockdown in an abandoned mansion deep in rural England, a place the crew later refused to name publicly. According to Yvette, it began like any other investigation. Cameras rolling, questions echoing in the dark, and that eerie stillness that every ghost hunter learns to fear. But something was different that night. It didn't feel like a haunting, she said. It felt like we were being hunted. The temperature dropped suddenly. Their equipment started malfunctioning, lights flickering erratically. One of the sound engineers swore he saw a figure standing behind Yvette, but when they turned the camera, nothing was there. The air felt charged, heavy, almost alive. Moments later, a loud metallic crash echoed through the hallway, and their main camera cut out. What the backup camera caught, Yvette says, still keeps her awake at night. For just 2 seconds, the screen flickered, and a dark shape, taller than any of them, darted across the corridor. It wasn't transparent, it wasn't mist, it was solid. After the crash, Yvette began to shake uncontrollably. The crew rushed to her side, and Carl tried to calm her down, but she couldn't speak. She described feeling something ice-cold grip her wrist, squeezing until her fingers went numb. When the lights finally came back, there was a red mark on her arm, long, thin, and unmistakably human. It wasn't pain, she said years later. It was a warning. That night, they wrapped early, shaken and silent. The footage was reviewed once, then sealed away. The next morning, one of the cameramen refused to come back, claiming he'd woken up to find muddy footprints leading to his bed. Another fell ill days later and never returned to filming. When Yvette tried to discuss what happened in production meetings, she said she was told to forget it. The higher-ups didn't want panic, she explained. They wanted ratings. But something had changed in her. Yvette started sleeping with a light on. She'd flinch at sudden noises and refused to enter basements or cellars. Even off-camera, she said, she could feel a presence, one that seemed to follow her from location to location. I'd see it sometimes, just in the corner of my eye, she confessed. The same shadow, the same feeling. It was after that night that the nightmares began. Vivid dreams of whispering voices calling her name, of figures standing over her bed, of hearing the word "stay" whispered into her ear. Carl admitted later that he'd wake to find her crying in her sleep, mumbling, "Don't touch me." Years later, when Yvette was asked point-blank if she believed something followed her home from that mansion, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said softly, "and I don't think it ever left." That encounter didn't just change Yvette Fielding's life. It marked the moment Most Haunted stopped being entertainment. It became real, and from that point on, Yvette wasn't just investigating ghosts. She was living with one. After the mansion incident, Yvette Fielding was never the same. Crew members noticed it immediately. Her once calm confidence replaced by unease, her laughter forced, her eyes darting toward empty corners of every set. What had begun as a thrilling career exploring the unknown had turned into something that consumed her. She'd arrive early and sit in silence before we started filming. One production assistant recalled, "It was like she was preparing for battle, not a shoot." At first, she tried to keep her fears hidden. She insisted on finishing each episode, no matter how shaken she looked on camera. But privately, the cracks deepened. She began suffering intense migraines during travel days, nosebleeds during long lockdowns, and sudden chills that made her physically shake. On one occasion, she collapsed moments before the cameras rolled, whispering, "It doesn't want me here." The crew dismissed it as exhaustion, but Carl knew better. He later admitted that he would sometimes wake at night to find Yvette sitting upright in bed, staring toward the hallway, whispering, "Did you hear that?" Then came the letters. Dozens of them, all unsigned, began arriving at the studio. Some were from fans, claiming they had seen figures standing behind Yvette during certain episodes. Others contained threats, scribbled messages warning her to stop the investigations or they'd make her stop. Security traced the handwriting to no one. "At first, we thought it was trolls," Carl said. "But then we started getting emails with things no one could have known. Details from locations we hadn't even announced yet." Yvette's health spiraled. She began trembling before every lockdown, sometimes breaking down in tears right before the cameras rolled. One night at a castle in Northumberland, she reportedly froze mid-sentence, staring at a dark doorway for nearly 2 full minutes. The crew thought she was reacting to a sound, but when they checked the footage later, there was nothing. No noise, no movement, just Yvette standing still with her mic picking up a faint whisper saying, "We're not done." By the 17th series, the woman who had once led Britain's bravest ghost hunters was barely holding on. Panic attacks became frequent. Crew members were quitting, claiming the energy on set felt wrong. Even Carl, ever the skeptic, began to question if continuing was worth it. He begged Yvette to rest, but she refused. "If we stop," she told him, "it wins." Finally, after a particularly violent lockdown where equipment shattered and Yvette screamed that something touched her face, production halted indefinitely. She later confessed that she begged Carl to end the series for good. "I wasn't afraid of dying," she said quietly. "I was afraid of losing myself." That night marked the breaking point. Most Haunted had begun as Yvette Fielding's passion. It ended as her prison. And though cameras stopped rolling, the darkness didn't stop following her. When Yvette Fielding finally decided to speak, it wasn't planned or polished. It was a breakdown caught on camera. She sat across from a journalist during what was supposed to be a casual interview about her career, but as soon as the topic of Most Haunted came up, her voice began to tremble. The reporter asked if she ever exaggerated things for the audience, and Yvette went silent. Seconds turned into an uncomfortable pause, and then she whispered, "We didn't have to fake it." Not everything was television. The floodgates opened. For the next hour, Yvette poured out years of buried fear and guilt. She admitted that some of the show's recreations were added later to make sense of footage too disturbing to air. "We couldn't show what really happened," she said. "It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was dangerous." She confessed that several tapes were destroyed, not because they were dull or staged, but because they were wrong. One episode, she said, contained audio no one could explain. A low, growling voice repeating her name while everyone on set was silent. Another featured a crew member violently shaking on the floor after what appeared to be a full-body possession. "He never came back," she whispered, "and neither did I." Not really. She described the years after the show ended as hollow. Sleepless nights, unexplained cold drafts in her home, lights flickering at the same time every night. She admitted to keeping salt at her doors and burning sage weekly, saying, "It doesn't stop it, but it slows it down." Tears filled her eyes as she spoke of one final unrecorded moment, waking up one night to see a black figure standing by her bed. "It didn't move. It didn't vanish. It just stared," she said. and I knew it wasn't part of the show. It was here for me." When the interviewer asked why she chose to come forward now, Yvette gave a faint, exhausted smile. "Because it's still happening," she said, "and silence only feeds it." She looked into the camera, her eyes glistening under studio lights, and left viewers with one chilling warning: the paranormal isn't a game. When you invite it in, it doesn't leave when the credits roll. That confession would send shockwaves through fans and crew alike. Some called it courage. Others called it madness. But everyone who watched it agreed on one thing: Yvette Fielding wasn't acting. She was finally telling the truth. The moment Yvette's confession aired, the internet ignited. Within hours, clips from the interview flooded social media, her trembling voice echoing across thousands of posts. Fans who had grown up watching Most Haunted were in disbelief, some heartbroken, others terrified. "You could see it in her eyes," one commenter wrote. "She wasn't remembering a TV show. She was remembering something that still scares her." Former crew members began surfacing online, cautiously confirming fragments of her story. One anonymous producer wrote, "She's not lying. There were tapes we were told to destroy." News outlets jumped on the story, labeling it everything from a haunting revelation to a nervous breakdown. Paranormal experts defended her, claiming her symptoms matched what they called spiritual attachment. Skeptics, however, accused her of dramatizing her trauma for attention. But even the harshest critics couldn't ignore how genuinely shaken she looked. Meanwhile, Carl Beatty remained silent. No denial, no defense. That silence said more than words ever could. Fans flooded Yvette's page with support, urging her to rest and protect herself. For the first time, the Most Haunted audience realized the truth might have been staring at them all along. That Yvette Fielding hadn't been hosting ghosts for television. She'd been living with them. For over a decade, Most Haunted ruled paranormal television. Eerie castles, abandoned asylums, and fearless investigators walking straight into the dark. At its heart was Carl Beatty, the man who refused to fake a thing and demanded real proof of life after death. But what he found during one investigation went far beyond proof. Crew members still refused to talk about it, and some footage was reportedly locked away forever. What Carl captured was so disturbing that it changed him and marked the beginning of the end for Most Haunted. Make sure you're subscribed, because the truth Carl uncovered was never meant to be seen. Most Haunted began in 2002 as a simple idea: explore Britain's most haunted locations and document whatever happened. But under Carl Beatty's leadership, it became something else entirely. Alongside Yvette Fielding, his wife and co-host, Carl built the blueprint for modern paranormal television. Each episode followed the crew into chilling locations, decaying castles, derelict hospitals, and prisons that hadn't held a living soul in centuries. The show's style, handheld cameras, green night vision, whispered panic, drew millions of viewers who swore they saw faces in the dark and shadows that moved when no one else did. Behind the scenes, Carl was more than just a presenter. He handled much of the directing, equipment, and creative control, determined to make Most Haunted feel authentic. "If something happens," he once told the crew, "we don't cut, we show it." That dedication came at a cost. The filming schedule was relentless. Weeks in freezing stone corridors, sleepless nights listening for footsteps, constant pressure to find new locations darker than the last. But Carl thrived on it. He pushed the show's boundaries further with every season, inviting skeptics to witness experiments live on air and daring the spirits to reveal themselves. His fearlessness became legendary. When others flinched, he walked toward the sound. When cameras malfunctioned, he kept rolling. To fans, Carl was fearless. To the crew, he was obsessed. As Most Haunted climbed to international fame, its tone shifted from curious to confrontational. Carl wasn't just documenting hauntings, he was challenging them. The more the team investigated, the more personal the encounters seemed to become. Crew members started to whisper that Carl's confidence was turning into something dangerous, that he'd begun provoking forces he didn't fully understand. The show was changing, and so was he. What started as television entertainment was slowly becoming a battle with something unseen. And it was a battle that would soon consume Carl Beatty completely. As Most Haunted grew into a national obsession, Carl Beatty's determination to silence skeptics turned into something darker, an obsession that consumed every waking moment. The louder critics accused the show of faking evidence, the harder Carl pushed to prove them wrong. He started designing new experiments that blurred the line between investigation and invitation. He'd sit alone in pitch-black rooms for hours, whispering challenges into the dark. He'd bring home artifacts from haunted sites, pieces of wood, scraps of fabric, even stones, convinced they might hold residual energy. Crew members began to notice the change. He stopped treating it like television. One cameraman recalled, "It was like he was trying to open a door." Yvette Fielding, who had known Carl better than anyone, later admitted she became worried. "He wouldn't sleep," she said in a rare interview. He'd replay the same 10 seconds of footage over and over, saying, "Listen, it's talking," but all I could hear was static. During this period, the atmosphere on set shifted. Crew members reported unexplained malfunctions that only seemed to happen around Carl. Cameras drained faster, lights flickered, and voices appeared faintly on playback. Skeptics might call it coincidence, but to those present, it felt like something had attached itself to him. One investigator even claimed Carl's demeanor would change mid-investigation, his tone deepening, his eyes gone somewhere else. The breaking point came during an overnight shoot in a Victorian asylum. Carl insisted on performing an experimental EVP session alone. The others waited outside, monitoring the audio feed. 10 minutes in, they heard him whisper, "If you're here, make yourself known." There was silence. Then a deep, distorted voice responded, "We already have." Carl never spoke about what happened next, but when he emerged, his face was pale, his hands trembling. From that night forward, Most Haunted was never the same. Carl began carrying protective charms, something he'd once mocked other investigators for doing. The footage from that investigation was never aired. Officially, the tapes were unusable, but some crew members whispered that the network refused to broadcast what was captured because whatever answered Carl that night wasn't supposed to exist. The night that changed everything happened in late 2004 at a derelict hospital in Yorkshire, an episode that would later vanish from Most Haunted's archives. Carl Beatty insisted on leading the investigation himself, determined to capture evidence no one could dispute. The crew set up static cameras in the main corridor, while Carl roamed alone with a handheld camcorder, his breath visible in the freezing air. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then, around 3:12 a.m., one of the static cameras recorded movement, a figure crossing behind Carl, transparent but human-shaped, its head slightly tilted as if watching him. When they reviewed the footage later that morning, the room went silent. The figure wasn't a shadow, reflection, or trick of light. It was there, walking with intent, visible for less than 2 seconds before vanishing into the wall. A production assistant fainted. Carl stared at the monitor and whispered, "That's it. That's what we've been looking for." But the moment was short-lived. Hours later, the network's compliance officer arrived and ordered the footage sealed. The official explanation was technical corruption. But one of the editors who'd seen it told a different story. It wasn't corrupted. It was too clear, too real, and it looked straight at the camera Carl fought to keep the clip in the episode, claiming it was the most compelling paranormal evidence ever recorded on British television. The network refused. Within days, the footage was removed from the master drive and replaced with a cut version that excluded the apparition entirely. According to insiders, that night broke something inside him. He stopped speaking to the producers for weeks, furious that the world would never see what he'd captured. Yvette later admitted that she'd never seen him so shaken. "He believed that clip proved everything," she said, "and when they buried it, he took it personally, almost like they'd buried him." Crew members reported that strange things started happening after that night. Carl claimed to see the figure's outline reflected in glass, even when no one else did. Batteries exploded, lights popped mid-shoot, and a faint whisper, a low, guttural sound, appeared on nearly every new recording. The more he tried to debunk it, the worse it got. From that point on, Most Haunted stopped being just a show for Carl Beatty. It became an obsession, one that would lead him further down a path no network, and perhaps no man, should ever have followed. After the Yorkshire investigation, Most Haunted entered its most unsettling era, the period crew members still refer to as the haunting off camera. Carl Beatty, once the fearless leader charging into into darkness, began to change in ways that worried everyone around him. He became withdrawn, agitated, and paranoid. He claimed that the same shadowy figure from the lost footage was now following him from location to location, sometimes appearing in reflections, sometimes only in dreams. "It doesn't want the cameras anymore," he reportedly told a sound engineer. "It wants me." The disturbances weren't limited to Carl. Crew members began reporting identical nightmares, being trapped in the Yorkshire hospital, hearing heavy footsteps approach, and waking up seconds before something reached them. Their filming equipment malfunctioned more frequently than ever before. Batteries drained instantly, and cold spots appeared even in climate-controlled buildings. Yvette Fielding tried to maintain composure on set, but in later interviews, she admitted, "We were seeing things we couldn't explain, and Carl was taking the brunt of it. It was as if the darkness had attached itself to him." During one shoot at an abandoned manor in Wales, things escalated. The team had set up a lockdown in the basement, with Carl leading the investigation. The footage shows him provoking whatever was there, shouting, "If you followed me here, show yourself." Moments later, the camera jerked violently. Carl was thrown backward into a wall, hitting the ground hard. Every piece of electronic equipment in the room went dead at once. When the lights came back, Carl was trembling, staring into an empty corner, whispering, "It's the same one." That footage was never aired. The official explanation again was technical failure. After that, Carl began wearing a small protective talisman on set, a Saint Benedict medal given to him by a local priest. It was a strange shift for a man who once laughed at such things. He started limiting his time alone and insisted that certain locations be permanently removed from the show's itinerary. "Some doors," he said, "should never have been opened." Crew members described a tense silence that hung over every shoot afterward. What had once been a thrilling ghost hunt had turned into something grim and personal. Carl wasn't chasing spirits anymore. He was trying to escape one. And though Most Haunted continued filming, those who were there said the energy of the show was never the same again. Every new location felt heavier. Every whisper in the dark carried his name. By 2010, Most Haunted was unraveling behind the scenes. The show's success had turned into a curse, and Carl Beatty, once the driving force behind its fearless investigations, had become the center of a storm no one could control. Network executives at Living TV were growing anxious. Ratings remained strong, but something was wrong with the footage. Entire nights of filming came back distorted, files corrupted, sound warped, and cameras shutting off at precise moments when activity peaked. The studio's technicians blamed environmental interference, but Carl didn't believe that. He told Yvette privately, "They're not glitches, it's trying to stop us." The production team began filing reports about strange occurrences even at headquarters. Hard drives wiped clean, cameras found turned on after hours, and phantom audio appearing during edits. The post-production department allegedly brought in outside engineers to inspect the systems, but the issues couldn't be replicated. Then came the leak. In early 2010, a 15-second clip appeared online, supposedly from the Lost Yorkshire investigation. It showed Carl standing in a dark corridor as a faint, glowing silhouette crossed behind him, almost identical to the original banned footage. Within hours, the video went viral. Fans flooded the network demanding answers, but just as quickly, the clip vanished. Legal teams issued takedown notices across platforms, and within 24 hours, it was scrubbed from the internet. Behind closed doors, panic set in. Executives called emergency meetings, fearing the leak would damage the network's credibility, or worse, invite unwanted attention from religious and scientific communities already skeptical of paranormal programming. Carl was furious. He wanted the world to see it, to finally believe him. Instead, he was silenced. Multiple insiders later claimed he was told to drop the subject or be dropped from production. Soon after, Most Haunted disappeared from its primetime slot. The official statement cited creative restructuring. But those inside the production knew the truth. The network was terrified. Something had been caught on film that no one could explain or control. Crew members later described that period as a cold shutdown, where years of work, archives, and hard drives were seized and locked away in off-site storage. Carl withdrew from public appearances, skipping interviews and fan events. To outsiders, it looked like burnout, but to those close to him, it was clear something had broken. His once fearless energy was gone, replaced by quiet obsession. "They buried the footage," he said to a friend, "but they can't bury what followed us home." And from that moment, Most Haunted stopped being a television show and became a mystery the network itself wanted to forget. After Most Haunted was pulled from its primetime slot, Carl Beatty didn't fade away quietly. Instead, he became consumed by one final mission: to uncover what had really been captured on those forbidden tapes. Unable to accept the show's silent burial, he began conducting private investigations with a skeleton crew, using personal funds and minimal oversight. Gone were the large production teams and safety protocols. These were secret hunts carried out in derelict churches, abandoned hospitals, and forgotten estates the public didn't even know existed. During one of these covert shoots, Carl recorded something that even he refused to fully describe. The location was an old monastery in northern England, rumored to have been the site of exorcisms centuries earlier. The team's cameras captured an unexplainable sequence of whispers that seemed to repeat Carl's own name, distorted, layered, and growing louder each time. He later said the voices spoke in unison, ending with a chilling phrase: "We're not finished." After that night, Carl stopped all independent investigation. Close friends noticed his health deteriorating, severe insomnia, anxiety, and periods of isolation. He told one confidant, "The show opened something we shouldn't have touched." He claimed the same pattern of malfunctions followed him even outside the field. Phones switching on by themselves, footage corrupting at random, objects moving in his office when no one was around. Despite his deteriorating condition, Carl was still drawn to the truth. He analyzed the monastery audio repeatedly and found strange data embedded in the waveform, frequencies that didn't match human speech. He sent the clip to two independent sound engineers, both of whom refused to comment after reviewing it. One sent only a single line in reply: "If this is real, stop digging." From then on, Carl avoided discussing Most Haunted publicly. Even Yvette Fielding admitted she didn't know what he found that night, only that, whatever it was, he was never the same again. The investigation that began as his personal crusade for proof had turned into a private horror. And though the public believed the show had ended because of low ratings, those closest to Carl knew the truth. It ended because of what he found when the cameras kept rolling. By 2012, Most Haunted was barely holding together. The crew was exhausted, the network wary, and Carl Beatty was a man unraveling under the weight of what he'd seen. Living TV executives officially cited creative differences when they finally canceled the show, but everyone involved knew that wasn't the full story. Strange incidents plagued the final shoots, cameras shorting out in unison, static bursts that erased entire recordings, and an unbearable heaviness that hung over every set. Some crew members refused to enter certain locations altogether. One sound technician later confessed, "It wasn't just haunted places anymore. It was us. We were haunted." Carl tried to push forward, insisting that the series end on his terms, but the deeper he went, the more it felt like something was pushing back. On one of the final nights of filming, during a lockdown inside an abandoned rectory, the team's night vision cameras captured a loud metallic bang, followed by a human scream that didn't match any voice on set. When they reviewed the footage later, the sound wasn't there. It had simply vanished from the digital file, as if erased by something unseen. After that night, several longtime crew members quit. Editors refused to review the final tapes alone. Even Yvette Fielding began to question whether continuing the show was safe. She reportedly told Carl, "Whatever this is, it doesn't want us filming it anymore." Carl agreed, reluctantly. "If we keep going," he said, "something bad will happen." Days later, the network announced the show's temporary end. Behind the scenes, Carl attempted to archive every frame of the final season himself. But when he tried to access the raw drives, he found them empty, wiped clean. The network called it a storage malfunction, though engineers couldn't explain how every backup vanished simultaneously. The official cancellation came weeks later, marking the quiet death of one of Britain's most iconic paranormal series. Fans thought it ended because of declining interest. Insiders knew better. The show hadn't just lost its edge, it had crossed a line. As one producer later admitted off-record, the cameras stopped working the moment something started watching back. Years passed before Carl Beatty spoke publicly about the end of Most Haunted. When he finally did, the man who had once laughed in the face of the unknown seemed like a shadow of himself, quieter, cautious, and carrying the weight of something unsaid. In a 2017 interview meant to celebrate the show's anniversary, Carl unexpectedly shifted from nostalgia to unease. "We caught something," he said softly, "something intelligent. It wasn't human, and it knew we were there." His voice trembled as he spoke, and for a moment, even the interviewer fell silent. When pressed for details, Carl hesitated, then looked off camera. "Some footage should never be seen," he finally said. "It's not about scaring people, it's about protecting them." That statement reignited years of speculation. Fans flooded forums demanding answers, while former crew members refused to comment. But one production assistant, speaking anonymously, confirmed that during the final year of filming, a sequence was captured that didn't behave like anything on Earth. The assistant described watching it once, a figure moving toward the lens, its face flickering between human and something else, before the file abruptly corrupted. "We tried to play it again," they said. "It was gone." Carl would never acknowledge the specifics, but his body language told its own story. He admitted that after the footage was locked away, he began to feel a presence that wasn't confined to any one location. He hinted that whatever they had encountered during those final investigations attached itself to the work. "It's not tied to places," he explained. "It's tied to intent. We called out and something answered." After that interview, Carl refused further press appearances. Yvette Fielding later revealed that he had become withdrawn at home, avoiding discussions about the paranormal entirely. "He's not scared of ghosts," she said quietly. "He's scared of what we prove." Though Carl never revealed what was on that lost recording, his silence spoke louder than any confession could. It wasn't the ghosts that ended Most Haunted. It was what they found when the cameras stopped, something Carl still believes should never have been filmed at all. Today, Carl Beatty avoids all discussion of Most Haunted's final years. He and Yvette still appear at conventions, but questions about the lost tapes are off limits. Former crew members describe lingering unease, claiming unexplained voices still appear on archived audio. Fans have turned the missing footage into legend, the forbidden episode. Whether it was real or a product of fear and exhaustion, no one can say for sure. But those who knew Carl believe he truly saw something that night, something that stared back. His final words on the matter remain chillingly simple. "Ghosts aren't what frighten me anymore. It's what watches when we stop filming."
After 20 years of silence, Yvette Fielding just did something that could destroy her career. The Most Haunted host has finally released footage that was banned from ever being shown on television. We're talking about investigations so disturbing that network executives locked them away and forbade the crew from ever speaking about what happened. Footage showing things that made seasoned paranormal investigators quit the show and refuse to ever return. Incidents so dark that even Yvette herself questioned whether they should continue filming. For 2 decades, fans have whispered about these lost episodes and suppressed scenes. Now, the truth is finally coming out, and it's far worse than anyone imagined. What did the cameras capture that was too terrifying for TV? Hit subscribe right now, because what we're about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about Most Haunted. When Most Haunted first aired in 2002 on Living TV in the UK, it revolutionized paranormal television. Before Most Haunted, ghost hunting shows were rare, low budget, and mostly forgettable. Yvette Fielding, a former children's TV presenter, created something completely different. A show that combined legitimate historical research, cutting-edge investigation technology, and raw, unfiltered reactions to allegedly supernatural phenomena. The format was deceptively simple. Yvette and her crew would lock themselves inside Britain's most haunted locations: ancient castles, abandoned asylums, plague pits, execution sites, and locations with documented histories of violent death and tragedy. They'd investigate overnight using night vision cameras, thermal imaging, EMF detectors, and other equipment designed to detect paranormal activity. The team included psychic medium Derek Acora, parapsychologist Dr. Ciaran O'Keefe, and a rotating crew of investigators and cameramen. What made Most Haunted different was the visceral, immediate nature of the investigations. Cameras captured Yvette screaming and running from unseen forces, objects flying across rooms, doors slamming with no explanation, and Derek Acora being violently possessed by malevolent spirits. Whether you believed it was real or staged, the show was utterly compelling television. Most Haunted became a massive hit, running for over 300 episodes across multiple series. It spawned countless imitators. Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, Paranormal Lockdown, and dozens of others all followed the template Most Haunted created. The show made Yvette Fielding a household name and turned Derek Acora into one of Britain's most famous psychic mediums. But behind the scenes, something darker was happening. The crew was investigating locations with genuinely horrific histories, sites where hundreds died in agony, where torture and execution were commonplace, where mental patients were abused for decades. They were spending night after night in these places, deliberately provoking whatever entities might reside there, and some episodes went so wrong that the network refused to air them. Former crew members have hinted over the years that certain investigations crossed lines that shouldn't have been crossed. There were incidents where people were physically injured, psychologically traumatized, or experienced phenomena so disturbing that they refused to discuss it publicly. Episodes that were filmed, edited, and then locked away because broadcasting them would be irresponsible or potentially dangerous. The whispers persisted for years. Fans on forums compiled lists of lost episodes that appeared in production schedules but never aired. Crew members would occasionally slip and mention investigations that went too far or locations they'd never go back to. But Yvette and the production company maintained strict silence. Non-disclosure agreements, legal threats, and professional pressure kept the banned footage hidden. Until now. In recent interviews and social media posts, Yvette has begun revealing what really happened during those suppressed investigations. Some of the banned footage has leaked online. Former crew members are finally speaking out now that enough time has passed, and the reality is far more disturbing than the rumors suggested. Derek Acora was the spiritual heart of Most Haunted for years. The Liverpool-born medium claimed to communicate with the dead, channeling spirits and allowing them to temporarily possess his body during investigations. His dramatic possessions, where his voice would change, his face would contort, and he'd speak as historical figures or malevolent entities, became the show's signature moments. But there was one investigation that nearly destroyed him completely. The crew traveled to Pendle Hill in Lancashire, a location infamous for the 1612 witch trials where 10 people were executed for witchcraft. The area has a dark, oppressive energy that locals have feared for centuries. According to local legend, the spirits of the executed witches still haunt the hill, and practicing occultists still perform rituals there. From the moment Derek arrived at the location, something was wrong. He became physically ill, vomiting before the investigation even began. He told Yvette he felt an overwhelming sense of evil, and warned that they shouldn't proceed. But the cameras were set up, the production schedule was locked in, and the network was expecting footage. Against Derek's protests, the investigation continued. What happened during that night was so extreme that most of the footage was immediately classified as unbroadcastable. Derek claimed to be possessed by the spirit of a witch who'd been tortured and executed, but this wasn't like his usual theatrical possessions. Former crew members described Derek becoming violent, attacking other investigators, speaking in voices and languages he shouldn't know, and exhibiting knowledge of historical details he couldn't possibly have accessed. The possession lasted for over an hour. During that time, Derek allegedly predicted specific personal tragedies that would befall crew members, predictions that later came true. He spoke about hidden rooms and burial sites at the location that were later verified by historical research. Most disturbingly, he revealed information about crimes and deaths that had never been publicly documented but were later confirmed through archive research. When Derek finally came out of the possession, he had no memory of what had happened, but watching the footage back, he was so disturbed by what he saw that he demanded it never be aired. He told Yvette that whatever had taken control of him during that investigation wasn't a normal spirit. It was something ancient, malevolent, and dangerous to interact with. The network agreed. The episode was shelved, The crew signed additional NDAs specifically about that investigation, and Derek himself changed after that night. According to people close to him, he became withdrawn, started having nightmares, and began questioning whether his gift was worth the psychological and spiritual cost. Some former crew members believe that investigation permanently damaged Derek in ways that contributed to his later health problems. The banned Pendle Hill footage has never been officially released, but brief clips have leaked online over the years, showing Derek in states of possession that look genuinely terrifying. Nothing like the controlled, performative possessions from regular episodes. In leaked audio, you can hear Yvette and crew members genuinely frightened, begging Derek to come back and discussing whether they should call for medical help. One of the most notorious banned investigations took place at a decommissioned psychiatric hospital in northern England. The facility had operated from the Victorian era through the 1990s, housing thousands of patients over its century-plus history. Like many institutions of its kind, it had a dark history of abuse, experimental treatments, lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and patient deaths that were never properly investigated. The building had been abandoned for years when Most Haunted received permission to investigate. Local urban explorers had long reported disturbing experiences there. Shadowy figures, disembodied screams, the sounds of patients crying and moaning, and an overwhelming sense of despair that made people flee the building in terror. The Most Haunted crew arrived for what was supposed to be a standard overnight investigation. What they encountered instead was so psychologically traumatic that 3 crew members quit the show immediately afterward and refused to ever work in paranormal television again. According to leaked production notes and testimony from former crew members, the investigation went wrong almost immediately. Equipment malfunctioned in ways that couldn't be explained. Cameras would focus on empty corners and refuse to move. Audio equipment picked up voices and conversations that weren't happening, and batteries that were fully charged would drain completely in seconds. Then the physical phenomena began. Doors in locked wards would slam shut, trapping investigators in pitch-black rooms. Heavy furniture moved across floors with no explanation. Most disturbing were the sounds, screaming, crying, laughing, and banging that seemed to come from all directions simultaneously. The crew tried to rationalize it as sounds traveling through the old building's ventilation system, but the audio captured on multiple devices didn't match any natural explanation. The breaking point came when one crew member became violently ill and started exhibiting symptoms consistent with a severe psychological break. According to witnesses, he began screaming about patients touching him, insisted that doctors were performing surgery on him, and tried to attack other crew members to escape the hospital. He had to be physically restrained and removed from the building. Medical evaluation afterwards showed no drugs in his system, no prior history of mental illness, and no physical explanation for his breakdown. But even after leaving the location, he continued experiencing flashbacks and intrusive thoughts about the hospital. He described vivid memories of being a patient there, memories that felt completely real despite him never having been institutionalized. Some of these memories included specific details about the hospital's layout and history that he had no way of knowing. The footage from that investigation was deemed too disturbing to broadcast. Network executives worried it could trigger psychological distress in viewers, especially anyone with personal or family history of mental illness. There were also legal concerns about showing someone experiencing what appeared to be a genuine mental health crisis on television. But fragments of the banned episode have leaked, and they're genuinely unsettling. You can hear the terror in Yvette's voice as she realizes something is seriously wrong. You can see crew members breaking protocol, abandoning camera positions, and fleeing the building. Most chilling are the EVP recordings, electronic voice phenomena captured during the investigation, which allegedly include voices saying investigators' names, describing how they'll die, and begging for help. During an investigation at an ancient execution site, Derek Acorah underwent a possession that went so far beyond his normal theatrical performances that the crew genuinely believed they might be witnessing something real and dangerous. The location was a medieval dungeon where prisoners were tortured before public execution, and the psychic atmosphere was reportedly overwhelming from the moment the team arrived. Derek claimed to be channeling the spirit of an executioner, a man who'd tortured and killed hundreds of people during his lifetime and took sadistic pleasure in his work. But this possession was different from anything the crew had seen before. Derek's physical appearance changed dramatically. His face contorted into expressions of pure malice. His voice dropped to an unnatural growl, and his body language became predatory and threatening. What made this incident cross the line was that Derek, while possessed, began describing in graphic, disturbing detail specific torture methods used at the location, and how victims screamed and begged for death. He named specific prisoners who died there and revealed information about their final moments that was later verified through historical documents. Most disturbingly, he turned his attention to Yvette and other crew members, describing how he'd torture them if given the chance. The possession became physically dangerous when Derek lunged at Yvette with clear intent to harm her. It took multiple crew members to restrain him while he thrashed violently and screamed obscenities. The incident lasted nearly 30 minutes before Derek finally collapsed, completely exhausted and with no memory of what had occurred. When he watched the footage later, Derek was so disturbed by his own behavior that he suffered panic attacks and initially refused to continue with the show. The network banned the footage immediately, citing concerns about broadcasting what appeared to be genuine psychological disturbance, masquerading as entertainment. There's one location that Most Haunted investigated where the activity was so intense and the aftermath so disturbing that the crew was explicitly forbidden by both the production company and the location's owners from ever returning. The site was an ancient plague pit, a mass grave where hundreds of victims of the Black Death were buried in the 14th century. According to leaked crew testimony, the investigation at this location produced the most compelling evidence of genuine paranormal activity the show had ever captured. Multiple cameras recorded objects moving on their own, clear apparitions appearing and disappearing, and physical attacks on investigators that left visible marks and injuries. What made this investigation particularly dark was the psychological effect it had on everyone present. Every single person on the crew reported vivid nightmares for weeks afterward, and disturbingly, multiple people reported having the exact same nightmare on the same nights. These shared dreams involved being buried alive in the plague pit, feeling hundreds of diseased bodies pressed against them, and hearing voices begging for help. 2 crew members developed mysterious respiratory infections after the investigation that doctors couldn't diagnose or explain. Both experienced breathing difficulties consistent with pneumonic plague symptoms, though medical tests showed no actual infection. The symptoms vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared after about 2 weeks. Most disturbing was the footage itself. When editors reviewed the material, they discovered that multiple cameras had captured what appeared to be the same full-bodied apparition, a figure in medieval clothing who appeared in the background of shots watching the crew. In one sequence, this figure appears to walk directly toward the camera before vanishing. Enhancement of the footage showed facial features and clothing details that matched historical accounts of plague victims. The network's legal team determined that broadcasting this footage could open them to liability if viewers claimed psychological distress, and the location's owners revoked permission for the episode to air after learning how disturbed the crew had been. Dr. Kieran O'Keefe joined Most Haunted as the show's resident skeptic and parapsychologist. His role was to provide scientific context, debunk fraudulent claims, and offer rational explanations for phenomena the crew encountered. He was openly critical of Derek Acorah, at one point famously planting fake historical information to prove Derek was using cold reading rather than genuine psychic ability. But there was one investigation that shook Dr. O'Keefe's skepticism to its core and resulted in footage that couldn't be aired because it undermined the entire skeptical framework the show used to maintain credibility. The location was a 16th century manor house with a documented history of ritual murder and occult practices. During this investigation, Dr. O'Keefe experienced phenomena that he couldn't rationalize away. He was physically pushed by an unseen force while cameras were rolling from multiple angles, capturing the incident from different perspectives and ruling out human intervention. He heard his own name whispered directly into his ear while standing alone in an empty room, with audio equipment confirming the sound wasn't environmental. Most significantly, he witnessed an object, a heavy iron candlestick, levitate and move across a table with no possible explanation. This occurred under controlled conditions with sealed rooms, night vision cameras from multiple angles, and no crew members within 20 feet. Frame-by-frame analysis confirmed the object moved on its own. In the banned footage, you can see Dr. O'Keefe's worldview crumbling in real time. His scientific rationalism couldn't account for what he was experiencing, and he became visibly distressed and disoriented. He's heard saying, "This shouldn't be possible, and I can't explain this," repeatedly. The episode was banned because Dr. O'Keefe's genuine crisis of belief undermined his role as the show's voice of reason. If the skeptic couldn't provide rational explanations, the show lost its credibility balance. The network worried viewers would either dismiss the entire show as fake or become too frightened by the implications. While Most Haunted regularly featured investigators claiming to be pushed, scratched, or touched by spirits, there were several incidents where crew members sustained real, documented physical injuries that had no conventional explanation and were deemed too graphic or disturbing to broadcast. During an investigation at a castle with a history of torture and execution, Yvette Fielding was allegedly attacked by an unseen entity. Cameras captured her screaming and collapsing, then revealed 3 deep scratch marks that appeared on her back, wounds that seemed to materialize instantaneously under her clothing. Medical examination afterward confirmed the scratches were real injuries that broke the skin and required treatment, but couldn't explain how they appeared. A cameraman at a different location, a former workhouse where poverty-stricken people died by the hundreds, experienced something even more disturbing. While filming, he suddenly screamed and dropped his camera. When crew members reached him, they found burn marks on his arms in distinct handprint patterns, as if someone with burning hot hands had grabbed him. The marks were severe enough to require hospital treatment for second-degree burns. Most disturbing was an incident at a Civil War battlefield site where an investigator was allegedly pushed down a stone staircase by an unseen force. Multiple cameras captured the moment from different angles, showing him standing at the top of the stairs, then suddenly being propelled backward with significant force. He suffered a broken arm and concussion from the fall. Analysis of the footage showed no evidence of anyone pushing him, no trip hazards, and no rational explanation for why he fell backward with such force. In the audio, you can clearly hear him say, "Someone pushed me," immediately before the fall. Most eerily, thermal imaging cameras captured a human-shaped cold spot standing directly behind him at the moment he fell. These incidents forced production to implement new safety protocols and raised serious questions about the ethics of putting crew members in potentially dangerous situations for entertainment. While the official explanation for banning certain most haunted episodes always centered on content being too disturbing for broadcast or potentially harmful to viewers, leaked internal documents and testimony from former executives reveal the real reasons were far more complex and concerning. Network lawyers worried about liability if viewers claimed psychological trauma from watching particularly intense episodes. There was genuine concern that broadcasting footage of what appeared to be real paranormal phenomena, rather than obviously staged entertainment, could trigger panic, especially among vulnerable viewers dealing with mental health issues or spiritual beliefs. More significantly, there were concerns about inspiring dangerous imitation. Several banned episodes featured investigations at locations where occult rituals had been performed, or where the crew encountered what they believed to be genuinely malevolent entities. Broadcasting detailed footage of these investigations could potentially provide a blueprint for viewers to attempt their own dangerous paranormal experiments. Insurance companies that covered the production also applied pressure. After several crew members were injured during investigations, insurers threatened to cancel coverage unless certain episodes were shelved and future investigations included additional safety measures. The banned footage documented incidents that could potentially void insurance policies if made public. There were also darker whispers about regulatory pressure. According to former production staff, government broadcasting regulators had quiet conversations with network executives about certain investigations, particularly those involving locations with military or government connections. Some conspiracy theorists suggest certain episodes were suppressed because they revealed information about locations or historical events that powerful interests wanted to remain hidden. Perhaps most disturbing were reports that some crew members and executives who viewed the banned footage experienced lasting psychological effects, nightmares, paranoia, and in one case, a complete nervous breakdown. This created an internal culture where certain investigations became cursed in themselves, with people refusing to work on editing or archiving the footage. So why, after 20 years of silence, is Yvette Fielding finally releasing banned most haunted footage? The official story is that enough time has passed, the people involved have processed their experiences, and viewers deserve to know the full truth about what the show encountered. But there are other factors at play. Most Haunted's popularity has faded significantly since its peak in the mid-2000s. Releasing controversial banned footage generates publicity and renewed interest in the show's back catalog. It's smart business, creating buzz and potentially attracting a new generation of paranormal enthusiasts. There's also the reality that much of the banned footage has already leaked online through unofficial channels. Former crew members sharing clips, bootleg recordings from editing facilities, and footage that somehow escaped the locked archives. By officially releasing and contextualizing this material, Yvette can control the narrative rather than letting rumors and speculation dominate. More personally, Yvette has spoken about carrying the weight of these experiences for 2 decades. The psychological burden of witnessing things that challenged her understanding of reality, combined with being unable to discuss them publicly due to NDAs and network restrictions, took a genuine toll. Now in her 50s and with Most Haunted's original run long concluded, she has the freedom to finally speak her truth. Some former crew members support the releases, viewing it as validation of experiences they've been unable to share. Others remain opposed, arguing that some doors should stay closed and some footage should remain buried. Derek Akora, who passed away in 2020, never got the chance to tell his side of the story about the most disturbing investigations. What's clear is that the banned footage reveals a show that was far more intense and potentially dangerous than the broadcast episode suggested. Whether you believe the phenomena captured were genuine paranormal events or elaborate hoaxes, the psychological and physical toll on the people involved was very real.
Once hailed as the First Lady of the Paranormal, Yvette Fielding brought ghosts and haunted houses into millions of living rooms. With Most Haunted, she carved her name into TV history, blending drama, fear, and curiosity into a cult classic. But behind the cameras, Yvette's story was not one of glamour or unshakable success. At 56 years old, her life tells a very different tale, one of controversy, personal heartbreak, financial strain, and a fading legacy. Tonight, we uncover the tragic truth of Yvette Fielding and how the woman who once owned the paranormal spotlight is now struggling in ways few could have predicted. Long before she became associated with haunted houses, spirit possessions, and late-night ghost hunts, Yvette Fielding was the smiling, youthful face of British television. Born in Stockport, Cheshire in 1968, she grew up with dreams of stardom. By the time she was a teenager, she was already making her way into the entertainment industry, quickly catching the eye of producers who saw her as energetic, wholesome, and marketable. At just 18 years old, she was given the opportunity of a lifetime, joining the legendary children's program Blue Peter in 1987. It was a groundbreaking moment. Yvette wasn't just another presenter, she became the youngest host in the history of the show. Audiences warmed to her instantly, and she quickly became a household name. On Blue Peter, she did everything from adventurous stunts to educational segments, all while maintaining a cheerful, approachable personality that made her a role model for children across the UK. Parents trusted her, kids adored her, and critics predicted a long, successful career ahead. But with that fame came pressure. Unlike most 18-year-olds, who were free to make mistakes out of the public eye, Yvette was scrutinized by millions. Every word, every expression, every slip-up was broadcast and judged. She was thrust into an adult world where the demands of television left little room for the carefree life of a normal teenager. The image she projected was one of polished confidence, but behind the scenes, she was learning quickly how ruthless the media industry could be. When she eventually left Blue Peter after 5 years, Yvette had already built a reputation as one of the rising stars of British broadcasting. Yet she also carried with her the weight of being typecast. Having been defined so strongly as a children's presenter, she struggled to find roles that allowed her to grow up in the eyes of the public. What had seemed like the perfect beginning carried within it the seeds of frustration, and it wouldn't be long before her career would take a darker, stranger turn. After her early success on Blue Peter, Yvette Fielding faced the daunting challenge of reinventing herself. The industry remembered her as the bright, youthful presenter of children's television, and breaking out of that mold proved far more difficult than she imagined. She dabbled in various projects, guest appearances, smaller presenting roles, but nothing seemed to give her the same cultural impact as her time on Blue Peter. For a while, her career drifted, caught between nostalgia for her past and uncertainty about her future. It was during this period that she began working closely with her husband, producer Carl Beatty. Together, they would conceive of an idea that would change not only her career, but also the landscape of paranormal television. In 2002, Most Haunted debuted on Living TV, a network known for niche programming. At first, the show seemed like a gamble. Would audiences really tune in to watch a team of investigators wandering through dark buildings with cameras and psychics in tow? But the gamble paid off. Most Haunted quickly grew into a phenomenon, tapping into the early 2000s fascination with ghosts, the supernatural, and reality TV. Unlike earlier paranormal documentaries, it leaned heavily into drama, live broadcasts, and the unpredictability of psychic mediums. mediums like Derek Acora. Yvette became the face of the series, guiding viewers through abandoned mansions, historic castles, and supposedly cursed locations. Her reactions, gasps, screams, nervous laughter, became as iconic as the alleged ghostly activity itself. For a time, Yvette thrived. She was no longer the wholesome children's presenter. She was now the fearless host, walking into the dark on behalf of her audience. She had successfully transformed her image and captured a new generation of fans. Yet even as the show rose in popularity, whispers began. Was it real? Was it staged? And how much of what viewers saw was authentic paranormal activity? And how much was manufactured drama? Those questions would eventually haunt Yvette just as much as the spirits she claimed to chase, planting the seeds for a controversy that would follow her for the rest of her career. When Most Haunted first hit television screens in 2002, few expected it to become the cultural juggernaut it eventually was. The premise was simple: gather a team of investigators, a psychic medium, and a crew, then lock them overnight inside some of Britain's most allegedly haunted locations. But under Yvette Fielding's steady hand as host, the show quickly became more than just a spooky curiosity. It became must-watch TV. Audiences tuned in not only for the ghosts, but for Yvette herself. She played the perfect surrogate for the viewer. Nervous but brave, skeptical, yet willing to believe, shrieking one moment and pushing forward into the darkness the next. She was relatable in a way few hosts were, grounding the chaos around her. Whether it was a door slamming, a strange noise echoing down a corridor, or Derek Acora suddenly claiming he was possessed by a restless spirit, Yvette's reactions became legendary. The early 2000s were fertile ground for paranormal programming. America had ghost hunters. Britain had Most Haunted. But Yvette's show offered something rawer, more unpredictable. The live specials became events in themselves, where fans gathered to watch possessions, seances, and sudden bursts of activity play out in real time. For younger audiences, it was terrifying. For older ones, it was nostalgic, harkening back to ghost stories and legends of their youth. The show gained an international following, even airing in the United States, where Yvette became something of a cult figure. Merchandising deals, spin-offs, and books followed, all reinforcing her position as the First Lady of the Paranormal. For a while, it seemed like she had completely rebranded herself from children's TV presenter to paranormal icon. Yet success brought with it skepticism. Critics questioned the legitimacy of the footage, and whispers of fakery began circulating. For a show built on trust, that audiences were watching something authentic, those whispers posed a serious threat. At the center of it all stood Yvette, caught between her duty as host and the creeping suspicion that not everything in her empire was what it seemed. The defining scandal that would come to overshadow Yvette's legacy on Most Haunted revolved around one of the show's most flamboyant personalities, psychic medium Derek Acora. Acora was a natural entertainer. With his animated mannerisms and his ever-present spirit guide, Sam, he seemed to embody the very heart of the supernatural world. But his frequent possessions, where he would suddenly change voice and mannerisms, allegedly overtaken by a spirit, began to draw suspicion, even from within the crew. Enter Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, a parapsychologist brought onto the show as its scientific counterbalance. O'Keefe, skeptical of Acora from the start, decided to test him. He reportedly fed Derek false information about a fictional spirit named Creed Kaffer, an anagram for Derek Faker. Sure enough, on camera, Acora appeared to channel this made-up entity. For O'Keefe, it was proof that Derek was either consciously or unconsciously fabricating his performances. For audiences, it was explosive. News outlets seized on the story, declaring Derek Acora exposed as a fraud. And where did that leave Yvette? As the face of the show, she was suddenly entangled in controversy she couldn't escape. Rumors circulated of her privately dismissing Derek's possessions, with alleged leaked recordings suggesting she didn't believe in them herself. Fans who once saw Most Haunted as the pinnacle of paranormal investigation now began to question if it had all been staged. The fallout was immense. Derek eventually left the show, but the damage was done. The scandal didn't just hurt him, it cast a long shadow shadow over Yvette as well. Even though she hadn't been the one caught pretending, she was accused of knowingly keeping him on screen despite doubts about his authenticity. Some praised her for allowing the scientific perspective of O'Keefe to be part of the narrative, but others felt betrayed, believing she had prioritized ratings over truth. For Yvette, this was a turning point. Most Haunted continued, but the credibility it once enjoyed was permanently fractured. Instead of being remembered as groundbreaking television, the show became synonymous with controversy. And Yvette, who had once stood at the peak of cult status, began her slow descent into a career defined more by scandal than success. After the Derek Acora scandal shook Most Haunted, Yvette Fielding tried to steady the ship. The show continued, cycling through new mediums, investigators, and live specials. But something had shifted. The aura of credibility was gone. Audiences who once tuned in religiously began to view the program with suspicion. Every shadow, every spirit voice, every sudden possession was scrutinized as potential fakery. And without the element of belief, the fear that made Most Haunted so gripping began to fade. Meanwhile, the paranormal television landscape was evolving. In the United States, Ghost Hunters grew into a massive franchise, offering a more grounded, technical approach. A few years later, Ghost Adventures with Zach Bagans burst onto the scene, blending investigative techniques with big personalities and cinematic flair. Compared to these fresher, more dynamic productions, Most Haunted looked increasingly dated. What once felt raw and edgy now felt repetitive. The shaky cameras, the night vision shots, the endless screams, it no longer carried the same punch. Yvette tried to adapt. She and her husband Carl launched spin-offs, produced live events, and experimented with revivals. But none of them captured the magic of the early years. Each attempt seemed to highlight the decline, rather than reverse it. Viewers who once considered Yvette the face of paranormal television began to drift to other shows. Her name, once synonymous with fear and suspense, was now overshadowed by newer personalities who had learned from Most Haunted's success and its mistakes. By the mid-2000s, Yvette's career had slowed to a crawl. She made occasional television appearances and continued producing paranormal content, but the cult status she had once enjoyed was gone. Instead, she was remembered primarily for the controversies that dogged her biggest creation. For someone who had been one of the youngest stars of Blue Peter and later reinvented herself as a pioneer of paranormal TV, this was a painful fall. What should have been a legacy of innovation and daring had become, in the eyes of many, a cautionary tale about how quickly credibility can vanish in the entertainment industry. Behind the scenes, Yvette's struggles weren't limited to declining ratings. Running Most Haunted and its spin-offs had always been a massive financial undertaking, and as viewership fell, so did the stability of the companies behind it. Reports of financial issues linked to production companies tied to Yvette and her husband Carl began to circulate. Legal disputes, debt, and accusations of mismanagement painted a grim picture of the business side of her empire. For Yvette, the stress was immense. Once celebrated as a trailblazer, she now found herself fighting to keep projects afloat while critics circled. The pressure strained not only her finances, but also her personal life. Though she and Carl remained a partnership in both business and marriage, the weight of keeping their brand alive placed them under constant scrutiny. Every attempt to revive Most Haunted came with questions. Was it genuine passion or a desperate bid to stay relevant and solvent? Adding to the difficulty was the public's shifting perception of her. Fans who had once adored her now questioned her motives. Some accused her of knowingly keeping questionable mediums on screen for the sake of ratings. Others dismissed her as someone who had leaned too heavily on manufactured drama. For someone who had once been trusted implicitly by British families on Blue Peter, these accusations were crushing. Financially, she had to scale back. Gone were the days of lavish productions and international distribution deals. By her mid-50s, Yvette was living with the legacy of decisions that had seemed like bold risks at the time, but now looked like costly mistakes. The financial security she might have expected after decades in television wasn't there. Instead, she was left trying to salvage a career defined as much by scandal as by success. In many ways, this was the cruelest twist twist of all. Yvette had once embodied the dream of British television, a child star who grew into a household name, who reinvented herself and built an empire. But now, at 56, she faced the harsh reality of what happens when an empire built on fear and spectacle collapses. The tragedies weren't just on the screen anymore. They were woven into her life behind the scenes. As the years went on, Yvette Fielding's reputation shifted from being the pioneering face of paranormal television to a figure associated with controversy and distrust. What had once been admiration for her bravery on screen began to fade, replaced by cynicism about the authenticity of her work. Colleagues and fans alike started to distance themselves, leaving Yvette increasingly isolated within an industry that had once celebrated her. Part of the damage came from the never-ending question of authenticity. Viewers who had grown up on Most Haunted remembered the nights of live broadcasts where Derek Acorah claimed possession or where shadows darted across the screen. But after O'Keefe's revelation about Derek being fed false information, many began to see the show as less of an investigation and more of a performance. And because Yvette was the face of the program, the criticism inevitably fell hardest on her shoulders. Even when she insisted she was simply presenting what unfolded, skeptics argued she had a responsibility to protect her audience from deception. Within paranormal circles, Most Haunted lost credibility. Groups of independent ghost hunters mocked the program as staged drama. Even those who believed in the supernatural turned on Yvette, saying she had turned serious investigation into sensationalized television that embarrassed the field. For a woman who had spent years building her brand on authenticity and intensity, this was a devastating blow. As her professional circle shrank, so too did her visibility. While Zach Bagans in America became the new global face of paranormal TV, Yvette became a figure tied to a specific era, respected by some for starting the genre's boom, but often dismissed as outdated and discredited. Friends and former colleagues described her as more withdrawn, focusing on family and smaller projects, while the industry she helped shape moved on without her. By her mid-50s, Yvette was no longer the fearless leader charging into haunted halls with cameras rolling. Instead, she was remembered as the host of a show many accused of faking its scares, her credibility damaged beyond repair. Isolation had replaced fame, and the trust she once commanded from millions had dissolved into doubt. If Yvette's reputation had already been fragile, the resurfacing of a supposed secret recording only made things worse. In the clip, circulated online and dissected by paranormal enthusiasts, a voice alleged to be Yvette's can be heard making damning remarks about Derek Acorah, calling his possessions fake and admitting that she didn't believe in them. The grainy audio, whether authentic or doctored, was enough to reignite old controversies that had never truly gone away. The clip spread quickly, with fans and skeptics alike debating its legitimacy. Supporters argued that it might have been edited or taken out of context. After all, Yvette herself never appeared on camera during the segment, leaving plenty of room for doubt. But perception often matters more than truth, and in the public eye, it looked like confirmation of what critics had always said, that Most Haunted was staged, and that Yvette knew it all along. The timing of the recording's resurgence was especially cruel. By then, Yvette was already struggling to maintain relevance, and this scandal reopened old wounds at the very moment she was trying to preserve her legacy. The accusations made her look complicit, as though she had allowed audiences to be deceived for years just to keep her program alive, even if she had privately doubted certain elements of the show. Airing those doubts in such a way cast her not as a brave whistleblower, but as someone who lacked integrity. Paranormal fans debated furiously, but the damage was done. For many, the clip became the final nail in the coffin of her credibility. It suggested that even the host of Britain's most famous paranormal series didn't believe in the phenomena her career was built on. Yvette's silence on the matter only deepened the mystery. Without a clear denial, speculation thrived. What should have been a chance to enjoy the legacy of her work turned instead into another controversy that kept her tied to scandal. The shadow of Derek Acorah long since departed, still haunted her career. And at 56, Yvette found herself caught between defending her reputation and retreating from a public that no longer seemed to trust her. In interviews, Yvette has occasionally spoken about the toll fame has taken on her. Years of scrutiny, relentless schedules, and the weight of running a television brand left her burned out. The controversies surrounding Most Haunted only deepened that exhaustion. Though she still makes appearances and dabbles in media work, she is no longer a household name. The woman who once commanded late-night TV slots now slips in and out of public view. Her legacy debated more in forums and YouTube breakdowns than in mainstream press. The tragedy of Yvette's life at 56 is not that she faded from television. That happens to many celebrities, but that her exit was marred by distrust. The very fans who had once screamed at their screens during her ghost hunts began to question whether she believed in any of it herself. The secret recordings, the Derek Acora scandal, the endless debates about staged moments, all of it eroded the foundation she built her career on. Trust, once lost, is nearly impossible to win back. Financially, she has faced hardships that further complicate her story. Running production companies tied to Most Haunted brought with it debt, disputes, and instability. What looked like a TV empire on the outside was often chaotic behind the scenes. Instead of enjoying financial security in her 50s, Yvette found herself navigating the fallout of years spent trying to keep a brand alive. Today, Yvette lives in a strange limbo. For some, she remains a cult icon, the fearless host who brought ghosts into living rooms and inspired a generation of paranormal enthusiasts. For others, she is a cautionary tale, a reminder that credibility can crumble overnight and that building a career on fear and spectacle often comes with consequences. At 56, Yvette Fielding's life is tragic not because she failed to achieve success, but because she achieved it, only to watch it unravel. The legacy she leaves behind is one of both influence and controversy, forever marked by the question, was it all real or was it all just television?
In the early 2000s, Yvette Fielding wasn't just a television presenter. She was a cultural phenomenon. Most Haunted exploded onto British television in 2002 and instantly became one of the most watched paranormal shows in the world. It was raw, intense, and genuinely terrifying for viewers who had never seen anything like it before. Yvette led the team into abandoned hospitals, ancient castles, and reportedly haunted locations across the UK, screaming and running through dark corridors as cameras captured what appeared to be genuine supernatural activity. The show made paranormal investigation mainstream long before ghost adventures or ghost hunters dominated American television. Yvette became a household name, trusted by millions of viewers who believed she was genuinely trying to document proof of life after death. Her background as a children's television presenter on shows like Blue Peter gave her credibility and relatability. She wasn't some fringe conspiracy theorist. She was the girl next door investigating the unknown. Behind the scenes, her husband Carl Beatty worked as producer and director, creating a family operation that seemed authentic and passionate about uncovering the truth. The show's format was simple but effective. Yvette and her team would arrive at a location. Psychic medium Derek Acora would provide historical information, supposedly channeled from spirits, and then the crew would conduct overnight investigations filled with unexplained noises, moving objects, and terrifying encounters. For years, it worked perfectly. Ratings soared. International versions launched. Yvette Fielding became synonymous with paranormal television. The production values were surprisingly high for the time, with night vision cameras, thermal imaging, and audio equipment that made everything feel scientific and legitimate. Viewers across Britain would tune in religiously, gathering with friends and family to watch Yvette brave the darkness in search of proof that death wasn't the end. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Questions were being asked. Skeptics were watching closely. Industry insiders whispered about staged moments and convenient camera angles. And one man in particular, parapsychologist Dr. Ciaran O'Keefe, was about to expose something that would change everything and destroy the carefully constructed illusion that had made Yvette a star. Dr. Ciaran O'Keefe joined Most Haunted as the show's resident parapsychologist and skeptic, brought in to provide scientific credibility to the investigations. But O'Keefe wasn't just there to validate the phenomena. He was watching analyzing and quietly conducting his own experiment that would eventually blow the show wide open. Derek Acorah was the show's star psychic medium, the man who would arrive at locations and immediately begin channeling spirits, providing names, dates, and historical details that seemed impossibly accurate. Week after week, Derek would be possessed by various entities, his voice changing dramatically, his body convulsing violently, delivering theatrical performances that kept audiences coming back for more. His most famous spirit guide was a man named Sam, who Derek claimed helped him communicate with the dead. The phrase, "Mary loves Dick," became an infamous moment in paranormal television history, emblematic of Derek's over-the-top style. But O'Keefe had serious doubts from the very beginning. As someone who had spent years studying paranormal claimants and testing psychics in controlled laboratory environments, he recognized the classic techniques of cold reading, hot reading, and theatrical performance. Derek's abilities seemed far too convenient, far too perfectly timed for television drama, always delivering exactly what producers needed at exactly the right moment. So O'Keefe devised a brilliant and devious test. Before filming at various locations, he began feeding Derek completely fabricated historical information through casual conversations and pre-production meetings, fake names of people who never existed, false stories about events that never happened, invented tragedies and fictional characters, all carefully designed to see if Derek would channel these non-existent spirits during filming. And Derek did, repeatedly, without fail. He would arrive at locations and begin communicating with the exact fake spirits that O'Keefe had planted in conversations days earlier. Names like Rick Edels, which was actually an anagram for Derek is Lead, historical details that were completely invented, tragic backstories that never occurred, all presented by Derek as genuine spiritual communication received directly from beyond the veil. When O'Keefe finally revealed what he had done in interviews and public statements, the paranormal community exploded with controversy. This wasn't mere speculation or typical skepticism. This was hard proof, documented evidence. Derek Acorah had been exposed as a fraud on national television, caught red-handed using information fed to him by production staff, not channeling spirits at all but simply regurgitating details he'd been given beforehand. The revelation should have destroyed Most Haunted's credibility instantly and permanently, but instead, something strange and deeply troubling happened. The show kept bringing Derek back, continuing to feature him prominently despite the exposure. For years, rumors circulated wildly about what really happened behind the scenes on Most Haunted. Crew members whispered in private conversations. Production assistants shared stories in online forums under anonymous accounts. But there was never concrete proof of how Yvette really felt about the deception, about Derek's methods, about the authenticity of what they were filming and presenting to millions of trusting viewers, until a secret recording suddenly surfaced online. The clip appeared on YouTube approximately 2 years ago, but recently gained massive renewed attention when paranormal investigator and content creator Mythos Paranormal analyzed it in forensic detail and brought it back to public consciousness. The footage shows what appears to be behind-the-scenes material from a Most Haunted shoot, grainy and clearly not meant for broadcast, with audio that allegedly captures Yvette Fielding's unguarded real thoughts about Derek Acorah when she believed cameras weren't recording for the show. The voice, believed to be Yvette's based on tone and accent, can be heard saying something absolutely shocking that contradicts everything she'd told viewers. According to careful analysis and subtitles provided by Mythos Paranormal after enhancing and isolating the audio, the recording captures this devastating statement. "I just saw you then, I go, then you would have had a bag a minute later and got possessed 5 times after that. Possessions aren't real because possessions aren't real. He's a fake." The implications are absolutely devastating for Yvette's credibility and reputation. If this recording is authentic and unmanipulated, it provides definitive proof that Yvette knew Derek was fraudulent, knew the dramatic possessions weren't real supernatural events, and continued featuring him prominently on the show anyway, deliberately deceiving millions of loyal viewers who trusted her implicitly to provide genuine investigation. The clip never actually shows Yvette's face clearly, which immediately raises legitimate questions about authenticity and verification. Could the audio be edited or taken out of context? Could it be AI generated using voice synthesis technology? The original upload dates back 2 years, when AI voice technology was becoming more sophisticated but still had limitations. Mythos Paranormal, the researcher and YouTuber who broke this story to a wider audience, attempted to reach out to Yvette directly for clarification and comment. He sent the clip asking if it was genuine, if it had been altered or manipulated in any way, or if she could provide any context or explanation. Yvette, who had previously been communicative and responsive to paranormal community inquiries, went completely silent. No denial, no explanation, no legal threat or cease and desist, just deafening silence. And in the world of public relations and reputation management, silence often speaks far louder than any carefully crafted statement could. If the recording was fabricated or fake, why not immediately and forcefully denounce it? Why not take swift legal action against what would constitute clear defamation? The conspicuous lack of response has led many observers to believe the recording is genuine and authentic, and that Yvette knew exactly what she was doing all along throughout the entire run of the show. When the Derek Acorah scandal first broke publicly through O'Keefe's revelations, the paranormal community was sharply and bitterly divided. Die-hard believers defended Derek passionately, claiming skeptics simply didn't understand how genuine mediumship actually works, and that science couldn't explain everything. But as more and more evidence emerged, as O'Keefe provided detailed documentation of his elaborate experiment with specific examples and dates, the tide turned decisively and irreversibly against Derek. Derek faced brutal, unrelenting public criticism, including a devastating live television appearance where outspoken skeptic Louis Sava confronted him directly and aggressively about his methods, beliefs, and the validity of his supposed abilities. The exchange was incredibly uncomfortable to watch, with Derek attempting desperately to defend his spiritual worldview and explain his process while Louis systematically dismantled the logical foundation of psychic mediumship with scientific arguments. The conversation became heated when Louis accused Derek of preying on vulnerable, grieving people for profit. But the controversy went even deeper and darker when Derek's own personal website was examined closely by critics and journalists. Investigators discovered that Derek had published disturbing material suggesting that people who suffer horrific abuse or violent murder somehow bring these terrible fates on themselves through spiritual karma, past life choices, or predetermined soul contracts. The deeply offensive implication that innocent victims of horrific crimes consciously chose their suffering before birth was morally reprehensible to most decent people, and even die-hard defenders of Derek struggled mightily to justify or explain away those statements. For Yvette, the continued association with Derek became increasingly toxic and career-threatening. Her show, her reputation, her entire career and public identity had been built almost entirely on the back of a man now widely recognized as a charlatan, and someone whose twisted spiritual philosophy essentially blamed victims for their own suffering and trauma. Most Haunted's credibility collapsed completely and catastrophically. Viewers who had believed every scream, every supposed possession, every dramatic moment caught on camera now looked back with clear eyes and saw obvious manipulation, staging, and deception. They felt betrayed, lied to, exploited for ratings and profit by people they had trusted. The show that had once dominated paranormal television and defined the genre became a punchline and cautionary tale. Parody videos appeared everywhere across YouTube and social media. Skeptical channels dedicated entire series to tearing apart old episodes frame by frame, pointing out obvious fakery, convenient camera angles that hid production crew, and suspicious audio editing that enhanced or created sounds. And at the center of it all, unavoidably, was Yvette Fielding, the woman who had sworn repeatedly to viewers she was genuinely investigating the paranormal with integrity, now exposed as someone who allegedly knew her star medium was a complete fraud and featured him anyway for years. The damage to her reputation was catastrophic, permanent, and perhaps most painfully, entirely deserved. After the controversy nearly destroyed Most Haunted completely, Yvette and Carl attempted multiple desperate comebacks over the following years, trying frantically to rebuild credibility and somehow recapture their former massive success and cultural relevance. Most Haunted returned for new seasons on different networks, now conspicuously without Derek Acorah, attempting to rebrand as more authentic, more scientific, more credible and legitimate. They brought in new psychics, updated equipment, changed the format slightly, anything to distance themselves from the scandal. But the fundamental damage was already done and couldn't be undone. Viewers who had trusted Yvette implicitly for years simply couldn't forget or forgive the betrayal. The ratings never remotely recovered to their peak levels when the show was a genuine cultural phenomenon. The show that had once pulled millions of viewers and dominated conversation was now a niche product appealing only to a dramatically reduced audience of die-hard fans who either didn't care about the controversy or chose to ignore it. Yvette attempted to distance herself carefully from Derek in various interviews and public statements, giving carefully worded responses where she discussed the challenges and complications of working with psychic mediums on television, but she never fully and honestly addressed the secret recording directly or explicitly admitted she knew about the fraud while it was actively happening and being broadcast. The carefully worded diplomatic statements and obvious evasive answers only made her seem more complicit and guilty in the eyes of critics and former fans. She and Carl launched other paranormal-related projects, trying desperately to prove she was actually serious about legitimate investigation and not just entertainment, but skeptics and former fans had already made up their minds permanently. Every new show was scrutinized ruthlessly and picked apart. Every supposed piece of paranormal evidence was torn apart immediately by online investigators and debunkers, who now automatically assumed everything was faked or staged. The internet had turned decisively against her with virtually no path to redemption. Where she once had millions of devoted fans defending her passionately, she now faced constant mockery, ridicule, and accusations across all platforms. YouTube channels dedicated specifically to debunking paranormal content made Yvette a frequent target, creating compilation videos of her most obviously fake moments. Reddit threads dissected every episode forensically, pointing out inconsistencies and likely staging. Twitter became a hostile environment where any mention of Most Haunted was immediately met with jokes about Rick Edel's fake possessions and Derek's theatrical performances. For someone who had built their entire identity and self-worth around being a trusted paranormal investigator and respected television personality, this relentless public humiliation was absolutely devastating on every level. Yvette went from being a respected, beloved television personality who inspired a generation to being seen as someone who had deliberately and cynically deceived vulnerable people who were desperately seeking proof of life after death to comfort their grief. The financial impact was significant and long-lasting as well. Most Haunted never regained its major network backing, international distribution deals, or lucrative sponsorships. Production budgets shrank dramatically. The show moved to progressively smaller networks and streaming platforms with limited reach. What was once a thriving television empire had been reduced to something much smaller, much less significant, barely surviving rather than thriving. While we don't have complete, unrestricted access to Yvette's private struggles and personal pain, the public evidence and observable behavior strongly suggests the scandal took an enormous and lasting personal toll on every aspect of her life. Her marriage to Carl Beatty, while still apparently intact publicly based on their continued professional collaboration, faced intense pressure that most relationships couldn't possibly survive. They had built their careers together from nothing, created a successful production company together, achieved fame and success as a team, and now watched their hard-earned reputation crumble together in real time. The stress of maintaining a public relationship and professional partnership while facing constant criticism, mockery, and accusations is something most couples never have to endure, and the psychological strain must have been immense. Yvette largely withdrew from social media platforms where she had once been extremely active and regularly engaged directly with fans, answering questions and sharing behind-the-scenes content. Her online presence became minimal, carefully controlled by handlers, avoiding controversy or any topic that might reignite the Derek Acora discussion or invite renewed criticism. For someone whose entire career depended fundamentally on public visibility, audience connection, and maintaining a parasocial relationship with viewers, this forced retreat represented a significant and painful defeat. Friends and former colleagues from the broader paranormal investigation community quietly distanced themselves to protect their own reputation. Many investigators who had appeared on Most Haunted as guests or collaborated with Yvette on various projects suddenly stopped mentioning her in interviews, removed references from their websites, or actively avoided acknowledging their past association when asked. In the relatively tight-knit paranormal community where reputation and credibility are everything, being associated with confirmed fraud and deception is absolute career poison that contaminates everyone nearby. Yvette's mental health almost certainly suffered tremendously, though she's never spoken publicly or honestly about the psychological impact of her fall from grace. Imagine dedicating literally decades of your life to something you presumably started with genuine passion, achieving massive mainstream success beyond your wildest dreams, becoming beloved by millions of people around the world, and then watching it all collapse catastrophically because of revelations about deception, fraud, and betrayal of audience trust. The psychological impact and emotional devastation of that kind of spectacular public fall is absolutely devastating and life-altering. She went from being someone people looked up to with admiration, someone who inspired widespread interest in the paranormal and made it accessible to mainstream audiences, to being someone whose name became permanently synonymous with fake ghost hunting and fraudulent investigation. For a person who likely started with genuine passion and sincere curiosity about the supernatural and life after death, this transformation into a cautionary tale and symbol of everything wrong with paranormal television must be deeply, profoundly painful on a level most people could never truly understand. Today, Yvette Fielding exists in a strange and uncomfortable limbo between former fame that she can never fully reclaim and relative obscurity that she desperately tries to escape. Most Haunted technically still produces new episodes sporadically, but the cultural impact and relevance is virtually non-existent compared to its peak years when it dominated conversation. The show that once pulled millions of viewers and launched countless imitators now struggles desperately for any relevance whatsoever in an oversaturated paranormal content market where competition is fierce. YouTube has completely democratized ghost hunting and paranormal investigation for better or worse. Anyone with a decent camera and basic editing software can become a paranormal investigator overnight, and many of these amateur creators actually have more credibility and larger audiences than Yvette because they were never involved in a major fraud scandal that destroyed their reputation. The barrier to entry disappeared completely, and with it, Yvette's special status as one of the few people with access to major production resources, professional crews, and network backing. She occasionally appears at paranormal conventions and fan events, desperately trying to maintain some connection to the community and her remaining fan base. But these appearances often attract protesters or confrontational skeptics who show up specifically to confront her publicly about the Derek Acorah situation and demand answers she refuses to provide. What should be friendly fan interactions and nostalgic celebration become uncomfortable confrontations about credibility, honesty, and whether she ever genuinely cared about truth or just ratings and profit. Her legacy is permanently and irreparably tarnished beyond any hope of rehabilitation. When people discuss the history of paranormal television and its evolution, Most Haunted is mentioned as an important early show that helped popularize the genre, but always with the necessary caveat about the fraud scandal and O'Keefe's exposure. Yvette's name appears in lists of discredited investigators alongside other controversial figures who were caught faking evidence or deceiving audiences. The woman who claimed she wanted to prove life after death and provide comfort to grieving people is now primarily remembered for allegedly faking evidence of it for television ratings. Financially, the situation is unclear since Yvette keeps her personal finances private, but it's highly unlikely she maintained the substantial wealth she accumulated during Most Haunted's peak years of success. Television residuals dried up when the show lost syndication deals. New projects consistently failed to gain significant traction or audience. The production company she and Carl built together never recovered its former profitability or secured new major projects. Most tragically and painfully, Yvette lost something that money absolutely cannot replace under any circumstances: her hard-earned reputation and the public trust she had spent years building. In an industry where credibility is literally everything, where the fundamental trust between investigator and audience is absolutely essential for success, having your integrity questioned publicly and never adequately answering those questions is an absolute career death sentence. And for Yvette, those serious questions have never been answered satisfactorily or honestly to anyone's genuine satisfaction. The secret recording remains the massive elephant in the room that Yvette has never properly, directly, or satisfactorily addressed, despite years of public pressure and repeated calls for transparency. Her continued silence on this specific issue is absolutely deafening and speaks volumes. If the audio was manipulated, edited, or completely fabricated as some defenders claim, why not simply say so clearly and provide evidence? Why not hire audio forensics experts to analyze and debunk it? Why not provide the original unedited footage or recording to prove manipulation? Why not threaten or pursue legal action against those spreading what would clearly be defamatory material, if false? The conspicuous lack of any response whatsoever suggests one of only two realistic possibilities. Either the recording is completely genuine, and Yvette knows she absolutely cannot credibly deny it without opening herself to further scrutiny, or she's been advised by expensive lawyers that engaging with the controversy in any way would only make things dramatically worse by drawing more attention. Neither option reflects well on her character or integrity. Other serious questions remain frustratingly unanswered as well, despite years of public interest. How much did Yvette actually know about Derek's specific methods and techniques? When exactly did she discover or realize he was using fed information rather than genuine psychic ability? If she genuinely believed believed he was legitimate initially as she's implied, why continue working with him extensively after O'Keefe's devastating revelation? Was the entire show carefully scripted from the very beginning? Or did it gradually become more manufactured and staged as ratings pressure increased and producers demanded better content? Did other psychics and mediums who appeared regularly on Most Haunted also use similar deceptive methods with production's knowledge? These questions matter enormously because they determine whether Yvette was a willing, knowing participant in deliberate fraud or someone who got swept up in television industry pressures and made terrible decisions that spiraled out of control. The paranormal community and the millions of viewers who trusted her deserve clear, honest answers, but Yvette has provided absolutely none despite numerous opportunities. Her continued silence might be legally strategic as attorneys advise, but it's morally unsatisfying and feels like confirmation of guilt to most observers. People who watched Most Haunted faithfully for years, who believed deeply in the investigations, who were genuinely moved by the possibility of life after death being scientifically proven. They deserved honesty and transparency from someone they trusted. Instead, they got carefully produced entertainment cynically packaged as legitimate investigation. They got fraud deliberately marketed as authenticity. And the person who stood at the center of it all, who claimed to care deeply about finding truth, has never fully acknowledged what actually happened or taken any real responsibility for her role in the widespread deception of millions.